Have you ever wondered how an insurance company really looks at a building? I mean, it's not just about the square footage or what year it was built. They're trying to piece together its entire risk story. And for literally centuries, they've used this simple but super powerful four-letter framework to do it. It's called COPE, and we're about to break it all down.
You know, our story starts where a lot of insurance stories do, with a total disaster. The Great Fire of London back in 1666, it was a massive wake-up call. It basically showed everyone that if you're going to manage risk, you have to understand it systematically first. And believe it or not, the basic ideas that came from the ashes of London, they're the very same ones we use today.
And this is the framework that rose from that disaster, COPE. It stands for Construction, Occupancy, Protection, and Exposure. Just think of these as the four pillars an underwriter uses to size up any property, from a tiny little shop to a giant skyscraper. Okay, to make this all really click, we are going to follow one building through its entire COPE assessment. Let's call it the Cornerstone Building. So it's an 80-year-old masonry building, a real fixture downtown. Our goal here is to see this building through an underwriter's eyes and build its complete risk profile, step by step.
So here's our game plan. We've talked about the history, so that's checked off. Now we're going to break down each letter of COPE. The building's bones, what it's used for, its safety gear, and even its neighbors, before we put it all together to tell the full story of the Cornerstone Building. All right, let's dive right in with C for construction. This is all about the physical stuff, what the building is actually made of, how big it is, and, how old its core systems are. This is really the foundation for the whole risk assessment. So, an underwriter is going to zero in on three key things here. First up, building materials. This is pretty simple. How easily does it burn and how easily does it get damaged? Second, the square footage, because obviously a bigger building means a bigger potential loss. And finally, its age. That tells you a lot about the building codes at the time and the condition of stuff like wiring and plumbing.
Now, these materials are all sorted into 6 different classes by the Insurance Services Office, or ISO. But here's the thing you have to remember, and it's a little counterintuitive. A lower number is actually worse. Yeah, you heard that right. Class 1, which is just a basic wood frame, is the highest risk, while Class 6, a super fire-resistive structure, is the absolute safest.
So where does our Cornerstone building land? Well, with those solid masonry walls and a roof and floors made of things like steel and concrete, non-combustible stuff, it gets a pretty good rating. It's a Class 4 masonry non-combustible. That is a really solid start.
But what if a building is made of a mix of materials? The rule is pretty simple. You're only as strong as your weakest link. A building is almost always rated based on its most flammable part. So if you have these amazing fireproof walls, but a simple wood roof, well, that roof is going to drag your whole score down. Now, there is an exception if a better material makes up over 2/3 of a feature, but the general idea holds true. All right, next up is O for occupancy. Because what a building is made of is really only half the story. What people are actually doing inside it, well, that can introduce a whole new world of risk. You can think of occupancy as a two-part question. First, what's the business? A quiet library is way different from a chemical plant, right? And second, how well do they manage the risks that come along with that business? This gets into things like general tidiness, employee training, and safety rules. This comparison just shows you how huge occupancy is. Think about our Cornerstone Building. If it's an accounting firm, the risks are pretty low. Some paper, some computers. But what if you put a restaurant in that exact same space? All of a sudden, you've got deep fryers, cooking oils, tons of people coming and going. The building itself hasn't changed, but the risk profile, it just went way up. So for our case study, let's say it's a restaurant. So we have a Class 4 building that's being used as a restaurant. That's a higher risk for sure. So now let's look at P for protection. This is the safety net, all the systems and services that are in place to either stop a disaster from happening or, if one does, to keep the damage to a minimum. Protection actually starts outside with public services. ISO also grades local fire departments on a scale from 1 to 10. It's called a Public Protection Class, or PPC. A Class 1 department, that's like the Navy SEALs of fire departments. Super fast, great equipment, tons of water. A Class 10, on the other hand, means you're basically in an unprotected area. Let's say our Cornerstone Building is in a PPC 3 zone. That's a very, very strong rating. Then you move inside to the private protection, and these usually fall into 2 camps. You've got your active systems, which go off automatically. Think smoke alarms and sprinklers.
Then you have passive systems, which are either just there, like a firewall, or they need a person to actually use them, like a fire extinguisher.
And speaking of extinguishers, having the right kind is absolutely crucial. A really easy way to remember is with the letters. Class A is for things that turn to ash, like wood and paper. Class B is for liquids that boil, like gasoline. Class C is for electrical currents that have a charge. And Class K, this is the big one for our restaurant, it's specifically for kitchen fires from cooking oils and fats. A restaurant has to have Class K extinguishers. Okay, we've looked at the building, what's happening inside, and all its safety gear. Now for the last letter, E for exposure. This means it's time to zoom out and look at the neighborhood, because risk does not stop at the property line. So, is a building an island? The answer is a huge, definite no. What your neighbors are up to can have a massive impact on your own risk. An underwriter has to think about all the external problems that could potentially spill over. Okay, let's picture our cornerstone building one more time. In this scenario, its next-door neighbor is a quiet public library. The hazard is low. It's probably well-maintained. This is a very low-risk exposure. The underwriter can breathe a sigh of relief. But now, let's swap that library for a fireworks warehouse. Whoa! Suddenly, the entire picture changes. The risk of something catastrophic happening next door is incredibly high, and that danger just bleeds right over to our building. The inside of the cornerstone building is still solid, but this external exposure is a gigantic red flag. Okay, we've gone through all 4 parts of the framework. Now it's time to put all the pieces together and see the full risk story for our cornerstone building. So here's the final profile. The cornerstone building has solid Class 4 construction. That's good. Its occupancy as a restaurant, though, that's a higher risk. But that risk is balanced out by very good protection, a top-tier fire department, and good internal safety systems. And with a quiet office building next door, its exposure risk is low. All in all, it's a balanced profile where the strengths in protection and construction really help offset the risks from the occupancy. And really, that's the main takeaway here. COPE isn't just about ticking off boxes on some form. It's a holistic narrative. Each part influences the others, and together they create this complete, dynamic picture of a property's unique risk story. It's a framework for real understanding. So next time you walk into an office or a restaurant, or even your own home, just take a look around. Think about its construction, its occupancy, its protection, and its exposures. Now that you know the framework, how does the building you're in right now stack up?